Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. Here it is, our final verse of the Dao De Jing. So, verse 81. I'm going to guide a meditation today after reading this verse. And then we'll take a couple minutes of reflection and I will reflect on the end of this text and talk a little bit about the overall, and that's going to be our day. I welcome any comments from you when we get there. True words aren't eloquent. Eloquent words aren't true. Wise men don't need to prove their point. Men who need to prove their point aren't wise. The master has no possessions. The more he does for others, the happier he is. The more he gives to others, the wealthier he is. The Tao nourishes by not forcing, by not dominating. The master leads. Arrive into this moment exactly as it is. Arrive into the somatic experience, the embodied experience. And notice your breath. Observe this human body as it breathes. Observe the sensations Is it possible to sort of soften everything inside so that you can surrender a little bit more to the somatic? It's almost like we're making it a little more pleasant inside, so the mind is more interested in what's going on. And we can do that with just subtle, relaxing. It might help to think of really specific places in the body to relax: the brow, the jaw, and then surrender to the breath moving in those places. Can you soften in your shoulders, the back of your heart, the front of your heart? And then as you relax that, can you allow the breath to almost caress that space from the inside? Can you do the same thing with the center of your belly? Can you do the same thing with your thighs and your feet? Just soften the space and allow breath to caress the inside of that space. We do this, we arrive and breathe. We surrender to the somatic experience. In the beginning of our meditation, until we feel a certain sense of groundedness, embodied presence, wholeness. And once it feels like that connection with the here and now through your body is established, check in with the here and now of the heart. Just do a little check in on how your emotional life is showing up today. And like the breath, but different, emotions move. Hence the very word emotion. Emotions have a presence like the breath does. They arise and fall. Unlike the breath, they don't necessarily tend to always be cyclical or rhythmic. They're not how we start usually. But it is really good and healthy to check in. What emotions have been moving through your system. What feeling states are present for you right now? What's the emotional context into which you sort of stepped into the day? And you're always welcome to do further work, practice, or inquiry on anything you find here. Today, we're not going to focus on the emotions too deeply, though again, maybe you want to journal about that later. But for now, my question is, whatever the emotional state is, however you kind of woke up or however you find yourself right now, can you trace that emotion back to love? So, just for example, I woke up and one of the first things I was thinking about was my work. And feeling a little upset and anxious and a little angry about something that had happened at work. But when I traced it back to love, I realized the whole reason I'm upset about having to do this whole extra task is because it takes me away from my students. And I started to think about how much I love my students and providing a space for them to come and do the work they do at the theater. And suddenly, rather than waking up kind of on the wrong side of the bed, I discovered that waking up that way was actually waking up with love. And I just had to reframe where it was coming from. And without trying to get rid of any negative emotions, without shaming ourselves for having natural emotions, we actually allow our emotions to guide us, to kind of take us by the hand and lead us to the real root, guide us to the center of the heart where love lives always. And in the context of that greater love, we become not so afraid of anger, anxiety, etc., sadness. They can all be in the room because the love shines so brightly, we have no fear that we'll be overwhelmed, consumed, derailed. I'm going to be quiet for a minute just for you to do your own version of that process as you need. When it's done, we come back to the basis of just watching the breath. But now you might also be aware of movement of emotion in the body, and we observe it all with curiosity and gratitude. Once you're back with the breath, once you've done any kind of examination or inquiry you wanted to into your emotional life and its relationship to love, and you're back with the breath, I also invite you, as you like, to add in a mantra. Simply I am, or I am breath, or I am love would do the trick. But I find that each individual has connections to different words and phrases. So I always invite you to discover something that clicks for you today. Lao Tzu tells us to understand the Tao, look inside your own heart. There are many ways to look inside the heart. First, we have to arrive. We have to become present and quiet enough. And then we can do an inquiry like we just did, following our emotions back to love. But really, any way that you can access observation of your own heart space, your own source of love. Any way you can do that will bring you back to the highest wisdom and the deepest peace. But what's really key is that we learn how to look inside for the source of life and love first. That's why we meditate first thing every day. So that when we open our eyes and we get up off of our cushions, we can see that light in others. If you don't believe it's in you, you will not believe it's in others. It will be impossible to see them as children of the Dao until you can see yourself that way. It's impossible to sit in total trust until you realize the source is right here and now. Otherwise, we're always going to be chasing after it, grasping it, trying to lock it up when we do have it, doing everything we can, tearing our lives apart to find it again when we feel it's missing. All of that is unnecessary if we learn how to find it right here. All of that starts to look quite silly once we start to find it right here. All of that actually invokes compassion when we start to find it here. The unnecessary effort and suffering that we bring upon ourselves, seeking this outside. In the final moments of this meditation, sit as if you believe it, you trust it, you know it's inside. Sit as if that light in your heart is so powerful and so obvious. It's so integral to what you are. That you've got nothing to prove. Nothing to hide. No one to convince. No one to placate or run from. Sit on your throne in the center of the universe and be the Tao. So there it is. The full text of the Dao De Jing. The last verses, this last week of verses 75 through 81. So you could just look through those. Or I also invite for this last session of the Daily Dao, just for you to share with me maybe your favorite verse from there. So they're all there in case you want to look through. Or the verse that you just still don't understand, or the concept that maybe gets repeated that you don't understand. I welcome all of that. Let's start right on the hour. So 7 my time, 8 for most of y'all. So you got a few minutes. I'll see you then. Great. Thanks for everyone who's chimed in about what they found most interesting, or captivating. And there's more comments coming in. I'm going to go ahead and dive in. So yeah, I'll reflect on 75 through 81. But I also want to mention, anything else that's coming in. So for instance, Betsy is mentioning that she keeps coming back to 67. Simplicity, patience, compassion as those three treasures. Oh, goodbye, Sage. Yeah, we appreciate you. Wonderful. Yeah, so 67, simplicity, patience, compassion, and we did a meditation around that very theme and around that very verse that day. And so anyone who is curious about the power of that one can check that out. 67, I think I also really love. I love that one for lots of reasons. That one also starts with telling us that basically, as we learn about the Tao, there will be people who don't get it, who laugh at us. And that difference between the people who get it and who don't. And this is a theme that also comes up again and again, and came up in the final verse, verse 81, of wise men don't need to prove their point. Men who need to prove their point aren't wise. And that sense of trusting our own wisdom and our own value enough to not be attached to other people's opinion of us. Great. I love it. So within the ones that we're covering for this particular week, we've had a couple of people say they really like 76. Men are born soft and supple, dead they are stiff and hard. Plants are born tender and pliant, dead they are brittle and dry. Thus, whoever is stiff and inflexible is a disciple of death. Whoever is soft and yielding is a disciple of life. The hard and stiff will be broken, the soft and supple will prevail. So that idea is really resonating with people. And my favorite verses also tend to be ones that, often, sometimes it's like a phrase that for whatever reason, the phrase itself, that also has something to do with our translator, of course. A phrase that I'll just kind of stick for whatever reason. The poetry of it really clicks with me, and it kind of becomes a mantra in my own mind naturally. Some of them I really like because there's a practical way to use them, and I feel like this one is like that for me. The reference to the somatic. I can sit in my meditation and I can feel where parts of me are being stiff and brittle, right? Same with any conflict that I have in my day-to-day life, right? I can feel that sort of hardening, physically, emotionally, mentally, and how that stiffness is not bringing us toward health. Yeah, great. I'm glad that resonated with folks. John Samuel. So last sentence of verse 8 dash. So I think there's only two it could be, either 80 or 81. We'll see if he wants to clarify. Content to be yourself. I think maybe he's talking about 80, where he says, talking about people who are content to die of old age without ever having gone to see the country next door. And And yeah, that one's a really interesting one. You know, I feel like 80, along with a few others, something about them doesn't resonate as much. You know, they can't all resonate equally, amazingly, beautifully. I feel like there's a lot about this one that can feel closed-minded almost. So 80 is sort of all about how, you know, if a country is governed wisely, it says, you know, uh, that the people basically just are so happy in their day-to-day lives that they don't want to travel anywhere. That's one thing that they don't want to do. They also don't want to fight. That's great. But I think as someone who loves traveling, it was like, that one is not so much going to go up on my altar. But there's always something I can find in everyone that does resonate, or that I get and enjoy and appreciate. Pamela is talking about 45. So we're gonna dip back to 45 and see what she loves about this one so much. True perfection seems imperfect, yet it is perfectly itself. True fullness seems empty, yet it is fully present. True straightness seems crooked, true wisdom seems foolish. True art seems artless. The master allows things to happen. She shapes events as they come. She steps out of the way and lets the Tao speak for itself. Oh, yes. Thanks for bringing that one back up. I really love that one. And again, this is something that is practically helpful for me. I am a perfectionist. Betsy says, yes, she steps out of the way. Yes, that's it. And lets the Tao speak for itself. Yeah, as someone who I can be really derailed by the desire to make things a certain way. I have had to do a lot of work on observing again and again that my way in my mind isn't necessarily better or right. To learn how to trust that I'm in a flow of something much bigger. I have personally come to see, and I don't know that this is true for all perfectionists or people who really like to have the outer world match the world of the plans in their mind. But in my case, it was also a trauma response. It's also a way to control scenarios. Because when I was younger, there was a lot put on me, and there's a lot of expectation and not as much maybe parental support, and the demands that I started to put on myself. The way that I thought I was going to win was through thinking everything through perfectly and executing perfectly, flawlessly, and that was how I was going to not have to suffer. It turns out that that's not true. That's not true at all. And all I have to do, I don't have to read this book and just believe him, just look through my own life and see how that's true. And of course, here's these paradoxes that throughout this whole, 81 days we've been talking about, and the repetition that we've been talking about, the ways in which, a book like this can feel unfamiliar. And part of this is likely because it's largely been passed around as an oral tradition. A lot of the repetition and the can help with that. The paradox, of course, that's all throughout this one, has at times felt a little cliche, I think, to some people here. And and again, a kind of a little bit over, like an overused, overwrought motif or tactic by the author. But again, if you look at the world, there's a truth to all of this. And here again is this theme that we saw before: true wisdom seems foolish to the fool, to the person who hasn't, not to belittle anyone, but just to the person who hasn't seen that truth yet. Just the same way I can look at my own childhood, or even, gosh, sometimes just 6 months ago, right? And go, wow, I saw things this way. I thought it was like this. And now that I've lived a little bit more, my experience has taught me otherwise. True art seems artless. And you think about the greatest artists make it seem totally effortless. Yeah, the master allows things to happen. She shapes events as they come, right? She's dancing with it all. She's putting on in her input that she steps out of the way and lets the Tao speak for itself. This also reminds me of, pretty early on in my teaching career, I started chanting to Ma Durga a lot and having this real connection with, I was using the words of Ma Durga, but I felt like I was really connecting with Mother Earth, Mother Nature, the great goddess, whatever that means. And around the same time, I was just in general singing a lot more. And I hit on this thing where I realized that the chanting became channeling, and my voice felt so much more full and rich. The whole experience of chanting became more powerful and engaging for me personally when I imagined that it was Mother Earth singing through me, and realizing that, of course, where did I get this body? Where did I come from? Who is singing, really? Aaron as an individual didn't invent vocal cords or a human body that is an instrument, So I didn't make any of this up in general. And specifically, I also, not in this version of my mind, right? Like, I don't remember choosing to have this incarnation. So how could I not assume that in some very real ways, something else was moving through me? And that was just such a shift, also seeing, like, I remember being on a silent, solitary retreat years and years ago and gathering flowers to put on my altar back at my meditation space while I was, wandering around in the woods and fields around my little hut. And as I was picking them, I was like, hang on. I was saying, thank you. I was saying, thank you, Mom. Thank you, Mother Earth, for giving me these flowers to put on my altar. And then I realized all I was doing was picking flowers from her to go put them on an altar for her. And I was like, this is funny. This whole thing, everything I'm doing is just taking from her to give back to her. And then that also reminded me, of course, that the gesture, the feeling, the heart really was my offering. Because all I was doing was giving the Dao back with the Dao, just giving it back to itself in my offerings and my spiritual practice. But that the only offering I can really give that, is the gratitude, is the presence, is the listening, is the love. Yeah. Pam says she shapes events as they come. I love that too, right? Not in her mind ahead of time, right? But in that dance, in that flow. And I'm also reminded of, artfulness and wisdom being really, really developed, over time. That ability to flow with things as they come, we can trust that more and more as we sort of practice it, and you become more artful as you practice it, like like John Coltrane doing his scales over and over and over again, so that in improvisation, it could just flow through him and his saxophone, right? And so it's just like what you're doing. I mean, every time that you meditate, every time in meditation, every millisecond that you pull your awareness back away from those thoughts and into the heart or the body or whatever you've chosen, your mantra, every time you do that, it's like John Coltrane doing his scales, right? So it becomes easier and easier for you in your life to do that in the moments when you're on stage, it'll, the lights are on you and everything's starting to happen. And you trust that you've worked those muscles, right? And so there is practice involved. That's something that has also come up for us a lot in this. It's like, wait, so we're just not supposed to do anything, and it's like, no, we are. We're always kind of getting ready for the next thing, and we're dancing with it as we're shaping as it comes. Of course, we're very involved. We're important here. But how do we do it in that space of trust that 45 captures so beautifully, in that space of flow? A couple of people say it's the story about the flower, taking the flower and giving the flowers back, being beautiful. It reminds Pamela of taking the flower and giving, makes her think of breath, the taking and giving of air back and forth. Yes. Oh, yeah. And that's it. And I think that once, seeing it that way naturally takes us out of ego, and it naturally puts us back into rhythm, cycle, that non-duality. The linear way of thinking that the cognitive mind, the youngest part of us, actually, the least evolved in a lot of ways. It's very evolved. It's very interesting. It's very evolved. I shouldn't say it that way, but it's the least ancient. It's the least primal aspect of us. It's the part that sees things in duality. It sees things linearly, beginning, end. Right? Mine, yours. I'm going to take something. I'm going to take this bouquet. I'm going to give it to you. You're welcome. What do I get back? Or, but if we start to see that it's all, we get way less attached. We get way less afraid. If everything's linear, maybe I missed a turn years ago and now I'm screwed. If things are binary, maybe I'm on the wrong side. Maybe I'm not good, but yes, that's it. And the offering and the gift, the freedom and peace and relief of the world not actually being that way, of us being part of something that is much more like breath, or taking the flowers from the earth to give back to her in offering. And the complicated, beautiful, mysterious universe that we're a part of is something that is so much better than what I can dream up in my little new little brain. I'm going to mention just a couple of things in these last verses that I just thought were worth highlighting, and we'll see if anything else comes in, and that's going to be us. I really love verse 77, and I recognize it at first. I love it because, unlike some of the other ones, unlike ones that are like, don't travel, or I don't know. It doesn't really say that, but it's always descriptive, not prescriptive in this text. But 77, I think one of the reasons that it really appealed to me is it really appeals to my contemporary politics, my very liberal politics, the way that I see justice in the world. So here's 77. As it acts in the world, the Dao is like the bending of a bow. The top is bent downward and the bottom is bent up. Oh, my Sanskrit homework. Okay, right? So the top bends down, the bottom bends up. Right? That's how the bow works. It adjusts excess and deficiency so that there's perfect balance. It takes from what is too much and gives to what is not enough, right? Balance, So it's like if the top is bending down too much, no. If the bottom is bending up too much, no. So that's our little metaphor that we're our jumping off point for this. Those who try to control, who use force to protect their power, go against the direction of the Tao. They take from those who don't have enough and give to those who have far too much. That right there, right, to me describes, the problem with a world in which we have ultra wealthy, which to me is just a different version of sort of the divine right of kings, Well, I can make this much money, so I deserve to have an unfathomably more than most people. Yeah. I don't know what else to say about that. I guess I just, I believe that that's very problematic. And I believe that when we're working against the Tao is more powerful and it will bring that balance back somehow or another. But wouldn't it be nice, and that's what this book is all about in a way, is if as individuals and as leaders, we did our part to let things be in balance here and now, right? To bring it into balance within ourselves and within our communities. And to be that force for balance and justice. 78 is more about that the theme of the supple, right? Nothing in the world is as soft and yielding as water, yet for dissolving the hard and inflexible, nothing can surpass it, right? Hang on one sec. We have this beast over here who's been sitting like a good girl, but then she starts chomping at me when she gets really impatient. Okay. I also wanted to mention 79, and I think this is the last one that I'll go into. 79. Failure is an opportunity. If you blame someone else, there is no end to the blame. Therefore, the master fulfills her own obligations and corrects her own mistakes. She does what she needs to do and demands nothing of others. The last part, can sound, to me, it can sound a little dualistic in a way. Like, okay, I'm saying that one feels like a heavy lift. That's interesting. It can sound overly extreme, I think. The last part, right? Demands nothing of others. I don't exactly believe that 100%, right? And I don't think that Lao Tzu does either. Lao Tzu is saying, be a realist and hold your leaders to account, right? It's saying take responsibility, but it's also taking responsibility sometimes does mean asking of others that they do the right thing. So anyway, that's the part of that I think that can feel a little funky for me. But okay, look, failure is an opportunity. We know this is true. Again, if you just investigate your own experience. Buddhism makes a really big deal about the fact that we have to, that the nature of duality is that you're attached to pleasure. Guess what? You're bringing about its partner pain eventually. If we are so addicted to success, then it turns out we can't handle failure without realizing that success and failure are actually two parts of one cycle. Children know this, which is why they learn how to walk by falling. They learn how to talk by making nonsense sounds. Have you ever seen a little kid's handwriting? It's pretty crappy. But do we go, it's a failure? No, because how else do we learn? It is a heavy lift because most of us still have an aversion to failure the same way we have an aversion to pain. But like what the Buddha is talking about and what I'm sure he and Lao Tzu would totally agree upon, is that physical pain and physical, failure. It's like these things, we don't get rid of them. What we have to do is start to learn to see that they're not bad. And then the Buddha talks about this a lot. He talks about there's the physical pain, and then there's a mental and emotional pain. The enlightened being does experience physical pain and death. The Buddha, like Lao Tzu, is a realist. And he's not making these, promises about what you're going to do if you follow. He's just saying, no, you are going to get sick and have old age and die. But you can take that journey without feeling resistant to it and attached to it not happening. And that is the peace. It's making peace even when and you're not making like double or triple suffering for yourself. It's just a little discomfort, right? And that's not to say like failing does feel uncomfortable for me. It's how I know that, oh, ow, okay, that wasn't quite it, like, ooh. And then I know, like, okay, it hurt last time. So that's how I know. I'm going to do it a little differently this time. Ooh, and then there's such satisfaction in the next iteration after the failure, right? And then, if we blame somebody else, I mean, this is just realistic. It's the same way that if we're looking for goodness outside of ourselves, if you're also trying to put the badness outside of yourself, we're mistaking how this whole thing works. And, if the baby fell down and was like, well, maybe sometimes they do, but they're, whatever. It's that thing's fault. It's the chair's fault, or it's the da. It's like, no, it's just, this is part of the process. I am choosing to learn how to walk. I'm choosing to, and they don't stop. It doesn't stop them, And so, to go beyond blame is, once again, just like all these things, it's like just on the other side of this little old habit of ours is actually peace. It's, something else we've heard is, the worst thing you can do is make enemies. So if you go around and in this beautiful world that you belong to, you start choosing, who to blame, or that's a never-ending game. That means that we never take enough responsibility for us to move forward. And again, I want to just caveat this whole thing with, I still believe that we're supposed to stand up for ourselves. I think we're still absolutely supposed to call out others who cross boundaries or abuse power. But I do believe that there's a different feeling of it than blaming, and certainly blaming others for things that we played our part in. Because when we do that, again, we're giving away our power. Okay, so John Samuel shared one more verse from earlier in the text. So let's talk about that before we wrap up for the day. Verse 29. Oh, I love this one. There is a time for being ahead, a time for being behind, a time for being in motion, a time for being at rest, a time for being vigorous, a time for being exhausted, a time for being safe, a time for being in danger. And he says, it sounds like Ecclesiastes. Yeah, that is true. That's interesting, right? And that doesn't surprise me either. There's always, some overlap with these spiritual texts, these spiritual teachings. I would be curious, John Samuel, if you wanted to share with us or share with me, if you can find what you think that this is like. I'd be really curious to look at that and to put them next to each other for myself. But of course, this from verse 29 brings up these opposites, right? Our non-duality means seeing that the world is not actually made of good and evil or of these opposites. It's made of these dancing pairs that co-create the world. And this one feels for me like this wonderful permission to be behind sometimes, to be tired. It helps me say it's okay to sometimes feel afraid or to sometimes be in danger, that there's a value to every aspect of the human experience, that there's a season for all things. And one of the things that we tend to get the most attached to is just status, like that things or like a, stasis, status quo, but that, things aren't changing. Things are always changing, right? And this verse is encouraging us to embrace that. Well, there is time for reading another verse of the Dao De Jing every single day, and then there's a time for that being over, and we are wrapping up on this today. Thank you to everyone who's participated in whatever way that you have. And going forward, here's what's up. You're going to find me here every Wednesday through April. I will be alternating next week. I'm just going to come on and do a silent meditation with you guys as we're all just kind of processing all of this. And then in April, I'll do a couple guided meditations. I'm going to lead a sharing circle for our sharing circle on Zoom for our subscribing paying members to get together in early April. And yeah, I'll be posting all about that in the next day or two for everyone to see. And you can always go to the events space to see what's coming up. I know that some of our other friends here are also going to go back to hosting. So there will be other opportunities to meditate together besides Wednesdays. So yeah, I look forward to continuing on with you guys in all of those ways. Obviously, the wisdom of this text is going to continue on with us. There's no way it can't. There's no way I won't continue to be quoting this text all the time to you guys. But now, maybe, hopefully, those of you who've been following along with this, as I do so, will feel more familiar and connected to the text, I hope. You'll feel a little more empowered, perhaps, to go back to this text if you want. And, oh, yeah, I remember when we did that day and did that verse. And, so I hope that the way that this book has been for me, that for some of you, some of the wisdom here starts to become a part of your life in a way that feels meaningful and effective. I'll say for me, I think one of the best things about all of this was just those first 40 days, getting up to 40 minutes of meditation together when our normal is 20. That was challenging and beautiful. And we were still just doing silent meditations, but there's something about starting my year that way that felt really, really grounding. And just, yeah, being together so consistently with you guys was so wonderful. I got some people just coming in saying thank you. Lovely seeing everyone. I've learned a lot. Really heartfelt. Prayer hands, heart butterfly. Yeah, I am so grateful for you all and much love. And you'll be seeing me post about all of this stuff soon. I did send out a survey last week. Only 2 people have responded, and that's okay. That's its own sort of response. Like, maybe people don't really want to fill out a survey. It's short, but if you do want to input what's coming up in the year ahead, fill out the survey or just get in touch with me. And otherwise, and I should also just, while I'm here, that was on Nowhere Village. You should have gotten like an email notification that is up there and then saw it there. But I'll share it again, Betsy. I'll share it again. I'll share the survey again. But I also want to remind people the retreat is coming up. And likewise, I only have 2 people signed up for a retreat. And I know other people have like verbally said they were coming, but yeah, if you are coming, let me know, because we gotta, it's only a couple months away. And yeah, and we've got, more adventures ahead. So let's look forward to those. Okay.